Hi, you're watching Reddit Confessions. The clock above the microwave was stuck at 7:43, but I swear I watched those red digits burn into my skull, as if time froze the moment she opened her mouth. One sentence. No warning. She didn't raise her voice. Didn't even look at me. She just stabbed me clean through the ribs, with her words, in front of 12 people who now know exactly how much of a joke I was to her. But no, let me correct myself. She didn't stab me. That would have implied emotion. She dismissed me, like I was an old receipt she found at the bottom of her purse. Everyone else kept chewing, blinking, trying to process what they just heard. Her aunt coughed into her wine glass. My nephew dropped his fork. Somewhere behind me, the hallway clock ticked far too loudly for a house full of people. And me? I just stood up. Didn't speak. Didn't breathe. Didn't ask for clarification, because deep down, I didn't need any. I walked past the empty pie plates and flickering candles. Past the kitchen where she once asked me to marry her in sweatpants holding a spatula. I walked past all of it. I didn't even grab my keys. Or shoes. I just left. That was 14 days ago. Since then, I've been living in my car behind a laundromat. I've used more quarters on dryer cycles just to stay warm than I ever did washing actual clothes. My feet are cold at night, and I smell like static cling and shame. But I'm not here for pity. Not exactly. I'm here because I've stayed quiet too long. Because everyone who was at that dinner now has a version of the story. Because she's already rewritten history. And because if I don't tell the truth now, I'll choke on it. What she said at that table wasn't the beginning. It was the finish line. The betrayal started long before I heard her say, "I think we're done pretending, don't you?" Yeah, that's the line. That's what she said, to me, in front of everyone. I didn't react. But I will now, because this is where the Rayal story begins. And it gets worse, so much worse, before it gets even remotely bearable. The second night in my car was worse than the first. The windshield fogged up from my breathing, and I didn't have the energy to wipe it down. I just sat there, slouched in the driver's seat with a jacket balled up as a pillow, staring into nothing. I wasn't crying. That would have meant release. I just felt hollow, like someone had scooped out everything inside me and replaced it with stillness. I didn't call her. I didn't text. I half expected her to at least check if I was alive. But my phone stayed cold and quiet. No missed calls. Not even a "where did you go?" Just one voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. At 3:17 a.m., I finally played it. A man's voice. Calm. Confident. Almost rehearsed. "Hey, if you're hearing this, I guess she didn't delete it like I asked. Sorry, man. You weren't supposed to find out like this." I dropped the phone. I didn't need to hear the rest. I already knew. And yet, like some desperate idiot clinging to a cliff edge, I pressed play again and forced myself to listen. She told me it was over months ago. Said she was staying with you for logistics, whatever that means. I didn't want to be the bad guy here. I told her to be honest. Guess that didn't happen. He sounded almost regretful. Almost. I stared at the glowing green of the dashboard clock. It was 3:19 now. She was probably asleep in our bed. Or not. I didn't know anymore. I wasn't sure I ever really had. That morning, before leaving town, I stopped by the house. Not to confront her. I didn't even go inside. I just sat across the street, engine off, watching the front door like it might blink or apologize. Then the porch light came on. She stepped out in a bathrobe, laughing on the phone, barefoot on the concrete. I watched her sit on the porch swing. That same stupid smile I once loved stretched across her face like nothing in the world had changed. Maybe for her, nothing had. But for me, everything had. I told myself I was only going to stay parked across from the house for 5 minutes. Just 5. But when you're numb, time turns into a fog you can't navigate. Minutes. Hours. What's the difference when your life has already slipped out from under you? I watched the lights go on in the kitchen. I saw her silhouette moving through the living room. The one we painted together in shades she picked while pretending I had a say. I couldn't look away. It was like watching someone else inhabit a version of my life I no longer belonged to. And she looked happy. That was the part that gutted me. She didn't look like someone who'd just dropped a grenade at a family dinner. She didn't look like someone who'd shattered a man and left him to sleep in his car. She looked light, relaxed, like whatever secret she'd been holding in for months had finally been exhaled, and now she could breathe freely. I hated that it made her glow. I should have driven away right then. I should have respected what little pride I had left. But instead, I stepped out of the car like a ghost, and crossed the street on legs that barely felt real. I didn't ring the doorbell. I didn't pound the door. I just stood at the edge of the lawn, staring at her through the window like a man trying to wake up from a dream. She noticed me. Our eyes locked through the glass for one long, brittle second. And then, she smiled. Not an apologetic smile. Not a shocked or guilty one. Just a small, effortless smile. The kind people give strangers on the sidewalk. The kind that says, "Oh, I forgot you still exist." I turned around and walked away. That was the exact moment something inside me snapped. Not in rage, not even in heartbreak, but in this strange, pathetic clarity. I had been erased. Not shouted out of her life. Not divorced with papers and signatures. Just edited out. Quietly. With the flick of her eyes and a smile that didn't belong to the woman I thought I knew. Back in the car, I reached into the glove box and pulled out an old photo booth strip we'd taken on our 3rd anniversary. We looked so stupid. She had lipstick on her teeth. I had ketchup on my collar, and we were laughing like the world would never change. I tore it in half without thinking, and that's when I decided. I wasn't going back to the motel. I wasn't going back to my job. I wasn't going back to anything. I was going forward, even if I had no idea where that was. I didn't drive far, just a few towns over, into a place with fewer memories. I found a cheap extended stay motel that smelled like mildew and burnt toast, and paid for a week in cash. The woman at the front desk didn't ask questions, which was a relief. I didn't think I could explain anything without falling apart. My room had floral curtains nailed to the wall, a flickering ceiling light, and a bed that felt like it was made of cardboard and regret. But it was mine, and it was silent, and that was enough. The first 2 days I barely moved. I lay in bed, staring at the water stains on the ceiling like they held answers. I kept replaying her face in the window, that detached smile. I told myself I had imagined it wrong, that maybe she had been startled or sad or sorry. But deep down, I knew what I saw. That smile was real, and it meant something. It meant I had already been replaced. On the 3rd day, I opened the laptop I'd brought with me and did the thing I had been avoiding. I went looking. Not for her. For him. It didn't take long. Social media always leaves trails if you know what you're looking for. His name popped up on an old tag photo from a holiday party. At first glance, he seemed like no one special. Tall, glasses, expensive watch, arrogant posture. One of those men who speaks in calm tones and corrects people for fun. But then I found a photo that made my stomach twist. It was from 3 months ago. He was standing on a rooftop bar, drink in hand. And next to him, partially cropped but unmistakable, was Tessa. She was wearing the necklace I gave her for our anniversary. The one she said she'd lost. My chest tightened, but I kept scrolling. Then I found the worst one. It was from a gallery opening. A professional photo. The caption said something like "power couples of the local art scene." And there they were, center frame. Her hand on his chest. His arm around her waist. Smiling. Radiant. Like they belonged together. And in the corner of the image, tucked into the frame, was something I never expected to see. Our wedding photo. Behind them. Hanging on the wall. She had used our picture as part of an exhibit. As a backdrop. As a prop in her new life. I wanted to scream. But no sound came out. I just sat there, alone in that sad little motel room, staring at my own face frozen in the background of someone else's story. That was the moment I realized. This wasn't an affair. This wasn't a mistake. It was a rewrite. And I had been cut from the final draft. I went back to the house. I know, I shouldn't have. Every part of me knew it was a mistake. But something inside was itching for answers, or maybe just proof that I wasn't completely insane. The lawn looked the same. The wind chime on the porch still made that hollow sound like it was laughing under its breath. But the air felt different, like the house itself had moved on without me. Like I'd been evicted from my own past. I didn't knock. I just stood on the sidewalk, staring. The lights were on. She was home. And then I saw him. Through the window. He walked past the hallway mirror, barefoot, holding a wine glass, my wine glass. I froze. Something primal took over, and I ducked behind the neighbor's hedge like a coward, heart pounding in my ears. I don't know why I stayed. Maybe I wanted to see her look at him the way she used to look at me. Maybe I wanted to see her pretend. But it wasn't pretend. She came around the corner, laughing at something he said. She looked relaxed, like this was routine. Not new. Not guilty. She handed him a bowl of popcorn and curled up next to him on the couch like she'd been doing it for months. That's when my dog barked. She hadn't seen me, but Daisy had. She was at the front window, pressing her paws against the glass, tail wagging like crazy. She recognized me instantly. I hadn't seen her since I left. She barked again, loud, insistent, joyful. The kind of bark that said, "He's home." And then I saw it. Tessa looked up, puzzled, walked to the window, saw Daisy losing her mind, and then saw me. Our eyes locked for maybe 2 seconds. Then she turned off the porch light. That was it. Not a wave. Not a step outside. Not a word. She just darkened the doorway like I was an intruder and stood there in the shadows while Daisy whined, confused and pawing at the glass, begging someone to explain what was happening. I backed away slowly, like I'd just robbed the place. My own place. Back at the motel, I sat in my car with the engine running and let the radio static fill the silence. The worst part wasn't that she moved on. It wasn't even the guy. It was that she made me the ghost. She chose to erase me, not with a fight, but with quiet dismissals, dimmed lights, and a look that said, "This chapter is over." Even Daisy knew something was wrong. And maybe that's what broke me more than anything. Not the betrayal, not the other man, but the way she made loyalty, mine, Daisy's, years of shared memories, feel like clutter she'd cleaned out of the garage. 3 days after I saw her with him, I got a call from our bank. A routine fraud alert, the automated voice said. Except nothing about this felt routine. I hadn't used the joint account since I left. I'd been living off the last paycheck I cashed before I walked out, stretching it across gas station sandwiches and a motel room that smelled like old mop water. But now, apparently, someone was making big purchases, home furnishings, boutique linens, even a set of wine glasses that cost more than I'd spent on our last anniversary. I knew it wasn't fraud. I knew exactly who was doing it. I asked the bank rep for the transaction history. She paused, asked if I was still listed on the account, and then politely informed me I was no longer authorized. Just like that. Removed. No notice. No warning. My name, scrubbed from the one thing we'd built together that wasn't emotional or symbolic, just numbers and signatures. It felt colder than any betrayal she'd made with her body. She'd erased me on paper, and I hadn't even seen it coming. I drove back to the house again. I wasn't thinking clearly. I just wanted to see if she'd replaced everything. If I was nothing more than a smudge she'd finally wiped clean. But what I saw in the driveway made me slam the brakes too hard and almost stall the car. They were unloading furniture. He was laughing. She was holding a clipboard. It wasn't just a visit. He was moving in. I sat frozen behind the wheel while they carried boxes marked bedroom, office, art supplies. I watched them toss aside the mat I bought that said, "Home is wherever I'm with you." They replaced it with one that said, "Welcome, sunshine." I don't know why, but that crushed me more than anything. That dumb little mat, so cheerful, so oblivious, now standing where everything I was had once belonged. I drove away fast. I didn't look back this time. But that night, in the silence of my motel room, I did something pathetic. I opened a folder I kept buried in my email archives. It was full of old drafts of love letters I wrote her over the years. Some I never sent. Some I did. I read one dated 6 years ago, after she got sick and I stayed up 2 nights in a row making her soup and watching her sleep. The subject line just said, "You matter more than you know." And now? Now she couldn't even be bothered to call me a person. She told her sister I'd vanished. That I left without a word. That she woke up one day and I was gone. No mention of what she said at the dinner table. No mention of the man in her photos. No mention of bank accounts or deleted texts or the way she dimmed the porch light when I stood outside like a lost kid. She said I vanished. But I didn't. She buried me. Quietly. Systematically. Like I was clutter. I wasn't planning to see her mother. It just happened. I stopped by the pharmacy near their neighborhood because I hadn't been sleeping again, and the parking lot faced her parents' street. Habit, maybe. Masochism, definitely. I sat there with the engine running, holding a box of melatonin I hadn't bought yet, and I spotted her mother, Elaine, watering the garden in her usual beige cardigan, even though it was 80 degrees out. She always did that. Even during July cookouts, she'd wear it like armor. She saw me, and for a second, I considered driving away. But then she waved me over. I didn't expect kindness. I didn't expect a slap either, though part of me would have understood it. What I didn't expect was the look. Not pity, not surprise, just heartbreak. Like she already knew everything without needing to hear a word. She didn't ask me why I left. She didn't ask me where I'd been. She just pointed to the bench under their maple tree and sat beside me like no time had passed. It felt surreal, like I was back in high school again, trying to impress her with how serious Tessa and I were. I used to believe Elaine liked me, that maybe I reminded her of someone younger, softer. But now she looked at me like someone staring at a grave they didn't know they'd have to mourn. "You were always the quiet one," she said finally, eyes still on the yard. She needed that. She just didn't know it. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to ask her how long she'd known. If Tessa had told her anything. If she was still defending her behind closed doors. "She's different now," Elaine continued. "I don't say that as an insult. I say it as a fact. You wouldn't recognize her anymore." I nodded, jaw tight. "She doesn't mention you. Not even when your name comes up. Like you were just a season." That hit harder than it should have. I thought maybe I'd at least left an imprint. A scar. But no. Apparently I was just weather. Temporary. Forgettable. Before I left, Elaine reached into her pocket and handed me something. A folded receipt. I looked at it, confused, then saw the total, thousands. For a weekend getaway. 2 names on the reservation, hers and his. "She charged it to your old joint card," Elaine said quietly. "She told me it was for closure." I didn't ask why Elaine gave it to me. Maybe she thought I needed proof. Maybe it was her way of saying sorry. Or maybe she just didn't want to carry it anymore. As I walked away, she said one last thing. "I hope you find someone who makes you feel real again." And I realized I hadn't felt real in months. I'd been floating in the aftermath of a life someone else had rewritten, erased, and overwritten again. But maybe now, finally, I was ready to exist again. On my own terms. I didn't go back to the motel that night. Instead, I drove without a plan, windows down, letting the summer air wrap around me like a blanket I hadn't realized I missed. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like a shadow. I felt awake. Maybe it was what Elaine said. Maybe it was that crumpled receipt in my glove box, still warm from her hand. Or maybe it was just time. I ended up at the lake where Tessa and I used to go during our early years. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't echo sadness but invites thought. I sat on a weathered bench near the water and let the memories come. Some sharp, some soft, all of them real. And for once, I didn't try to fight them. I let them wash over me like the ripples lapping the shore. I think that's when I understood something I hadn't been able to before. I was mourning a version of her that no longer existed. I hadn't lost her. I'd lost who she used to be, and who I used to be with her. That version of us had been gone for a long time. I just hadn't accepted it. But sitting there, under the stars, I realized something else too. I hadn't vanished. I hadn't been erased. I was still here. Hurt. Yes. But breathing. Existing. Rebuilding. The next morning, I called my brother in Oregon. We hadn't spoken much over the years. Life, distance, pride. But I told him everything. For hours. He listened. Then he said, "Come stay with us. We've got a spare room. You don't have to figure this out alone." So I did. I packed up my car, left that creaky motel key on the desk, and drove west. That was 6 months ago. I've been working remotely for a small company in town, volunteering at a shelter on weekends, and slowly rediscovering what it means to feel grounded again. I'm not healed. Not completely. But I'm getting there. One step at a time. And just last week, I adopted a dog. A rescue. I named her Daisy. She doesn't replace the life I lost. She reminds me there's still love left to give. So if you've ever had your story rewritten without your consent, know this, you're not done. You get to pick up the pen again. Maybe not today, but someday. Quietly, steadily, fully. Now it's your turn. What moment in this story hit you the hardest? Was it the smile at the window, the wedding photo on the gallery wall, or maybe the mother's quiet truth? Drop it in the comments. We read every single one. And if you haven't yet, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned. You're watching Reddit Confessions, where your story matters.